If you've been traveling for the summer or have been away for a while, we're glad you're here. If you're new to our parish or coming to church for the first time in a long time, or for the first time ever, welcome. We're glad you're here as we kick off a new season. Today we are starting a new series for this new season, and it's all about you. You and who you think you are, which, by the way, aren't always the same thing. Identity is what makes you, you. It's what defines you. And that means that your sense of identity is a big deal. It's a huge deal. How you define yourself, your sense of identity, has huge implications for your life. Huge. Now, there are lots of reasons that your sense of identity matters. But to start off, we'll look at 3 of them. Reason number 1. Your sense of identity matters because it will drive your actions. For example, people who gain a sense of identity from their work are what we call workaholics. They're extremely loyal to their company. They pour themselves into their work. They work evenings and weekends. They bring work home with them, and they often estrange themselves from their family in the process. But it was their sense of identity that they got from their work that drove them to them. Another example, gaining a sense of identity from your kids, from your role as parents. If being a mom or a dad is your be-all and end-all, you will pour in all your time and energy into your kids. Your kids will become your world. And eventually, that world will leave for college and university, and you can experience a severe sense of emptiness or feel like you may have lost your purpose. Another example, and I hope I'm not getting too personal here, but if you get your sense of identity from being a Leafs fan, then you will make sure you never miss a game. Your house will be decorated in blue and white. You will religiously wear your jersey and maybe even put on some face paint come game time. And maybe, just maybe, your sanity and your emotional stability will rise and fall with the team's scores and standing. Are you starting to catch on? You see, people invest themselves in what they think matters, in what gives them a sense of purpose. Your sense of identity will drive your actions. Reason number 2 that your identity matters is because it will determine the health of your relationships. Think about people you know who have healthy relationships, whether it's marriages or child-parent relationships or friendships. Chances are these people have a clear sense of who they are outside that relationship. Healthy friendships and romances can really form and be sustained when both people involved have a clear sense of their identity. Because that makes them able to give who they are to each other and able to share in their own personalities and interests with each other. On the flip side, it is an unfortunate truth that many relationships fail because one or the other partner doesn't really know who he or she is, apart from being a couple. We know that the relationship between parent and child breaks down when the parent tries to be the peer. It doesn't work. Or when the child becomes the authority. And that doesn't work. And friendships can quickly fall apart when one party becomes needy and annoying because they are unsure of who they are and they are insecure in that relationship. So it is safe to say that if you have a stronger, more stable sense of identity, your relationships will be stronger and more stable as well. The third reason that your sense of identity matters is because it decides what you value. You see, whatever defines you is ultimately where you find value and meaning for your life. You value what you think makes you, you. This could be your ethnicity, or what neighborhood you live in, or your school. Many people will look to what they own to help them define themselves. You know, the car you drive, the style of clothes that you wear, or where you go on vacation. Others look at their titles or their roles. You're a doctor, you're an attorney, you're a mom. And many people, actually more than you would think, will define themselves by their hobbies, their political leanings, their lifestyles, and their interests. Like, dog lovers are dog lovers, liberals are liberals, hunters are hunters, homeschoolers are homeschoolers, Renaissance fair goers are, well, different. And then there are people who are defined by what happened to them. War refugees, or victims of a violent crime, or survivors, or those in recovery. Any and all of these are places we can look to define our identity. But all of them, good, bad, and otherwise, are simply incomplete. None of them represents the fullness of who we are for any of us. If you think about it, many, if not all of these designations won't last forever. You can lose your job, or move, or go through a hard time, or lose an interest in a hobby. Sometimes we invest so much in this idea of self, only to see it fade away. This is clearly a huge topic. So to better unpack this, we're going to start by looking at a passage from the book of the Bible called Ezekiel. Ezekiel was a prophet who lived about 600 years before Christ walked the earth. He lived at a time when the city of Jerusalem was basically falling apart. The people there had pretty much abandoned God, and the whole culture had essentially become corrupt. And a nearby, very powerful neighbor, the nation of Babylon, was preparing to destroy the nation of Judah and eradicate Jewish culture entirely. Just at a time when the identity of the people themselves was under fire, and who they were needed an answer so they could defend that identity. Now Ezekiel, being a prophet and close to God, receives message after message from God in the course of this book. At one point, God tells him this: "You mortal, I have made a sentinel for the house of Israel. Whenever you hear a word from my mouth, you shall give them warning from me. Warn the wicked to turn from their ways." In ancient times, sentinels were stationed to serve as the eyes of a city. They would stand on guard on the city walls to warn of approaching danger. But the danger that Ezekiel is on the lookout for is no foreign invader. God says, "Warn the wicked to turn from their ways." Ezekiel is a sentinel for the dangers of sin and evil in the hearts of the people of Israel. Dangers that could diminish and even destroy the people. So God goes on to say to them, "As I live, says the Lord God, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from their ways and live. Then they shall be my people, and I will be their God." So God is essentially saying to Ezekiel, In this time where the identity of the nation is in question, he says, I'm going to tell you who you are. And I'm going to use you to tell everybody else who they are. And it's quite simple, really. You're mine. Friends, we all know the disappointment of not being chosen. Maybe as a kid, you remember the pain of being chosen last by other kids to play in a particular game, of not being picked to be on a team or in a play, or even not being selected for a job. We all know what that feels like. On the other hand, we also know the joy of being chosen for that team, or for the promotion, or for some sort of award. When it comes to our identity, what gives us a sense of who we are, instead of looking to our stuff or our relationships or our roles to define us, we should look to our Heavenly Father. Who better knows who we are than the one who created us? He not only understands who we are, but He chose to create you the way you are. God conceived of the very idea of you before anything ever existed. Isn't that crazy? The God who made the stars and the mountains and the sunsets thought the world needed one of you, too. And when the time was right, He knit you together in your mother's womb. He chose you and everything about you. He chose your parents. He gave you exactly the ones He wanted you to have. He chose your gifts and your talents and your abilities. He chose your strengths and your weaknesses. And most importantly, He chose to make you a part of His family. So basing our identity on God and who He says we are, well, it just makes sense. The Creator has chosen you. So there could be no better place to look for who you really are. Friends, this is a hopeful message, actually. The core of your identity is not found in your pain and suffering, as real as they are, but in how Jesus suffered and died on the cross for you. You aren't what's been done to you, but what Jesus has done for you. You are not the sum of your mistakes and your bad choices. You are His choice. You always have been His choice. And you are His.